Hey everybody, welcome to Life, the Universe, and Everything this fine Friday. And we're going to learn about how to make money being creative. And so I'm a filmmaker, I'm a producer, I make commercials, I produce web videos. I'm getting into an epic radio broadcast this year. I've been very fortunate to win some Emmy Awards and produce a feature film and all kinds of fun stuff. And today, I get paid a good amount of money to be creative. And so I know that when people come to LTUE and to other cons, a lot of the questions have to do with how do I get into this as a professional, and how do I get published? How do I get produced? How do I raise money? How do I do all of these different things? And those are wonderful questions. And the reason why I like giving these presentations is because I've made probably every mistake you can make along the way. And so my mission is to help save people time in their journeys. And so if I can possibly be of use to you in helping you avoid some of those mistakes, then maybe you'll get to where you want to go faster. And so these chairs are open here because I'm going to have two epic guests join me a little bit later in our session, Sam Payne and Jeff Parkin. And they're much cooler than me, so they have much cooler chairs. Um, but first, what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd tell you some of my story and how I kind of got to where I am today. And it's a really winding, strange road. But one of the lessons that I hope you'll learn from that is that everybody's journey is different, and there are a few very important tasks or attributes or tips that if you embody those tips, wherever your journey takes you, it's going to take you to where you want to go eventually. It takes time and money, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But again, hopefully, myself and my awesome guests are going to be able to help you avoid some of those mistakes. And so, I want to tell a little bit of my story, and I'll use some of these artifacts behind me to help illustrate them. Maybe I'll share a video or two. Um, but my journey begins where almost everybody's journey begins, in whether it's in film or in bookland or wherever it happens to be, by a piece of media that they consumed that they absolutely loved and really inspired them, really touched them, and in their heart there was something in them that said, "You could do this. You could create something like this." And the first thing I want to tell you is that's absolutely true. So everybody listening here, you guys have a story to tell. There's a lot of technique you got to learn. There's a lot of gumption you got to have. There's a lot of things that you need to do to be able to tell that story to a large audience or even to a small audience. But you can definitely do it. So take heart and don't give up whatever you're doing. Um, but anyway, for me, that was, drum roll please, Star Wars. Raise your hand if it was Star Wars when you watched that as a as a little kid, or depending how old you are, maybe you weren't so little when you first watch it. To this day, I'm amazed I actually meet people today who have never seen A New Hope. It's crazy. So if you haven't seen it, you need to rectify that quickly. Anyway, I saw Star Wars, and I watched it on beta. If you remember what beta videotape is, that's what we had. And I've probably seen that movie, who knows, dozens, hundreds of times. And I dressed up as Luke for many a Halloween, and even made a fan film when I was, gosh, this was before fan films were a thing in the early 90s. Yeah. And I don't have clips of that, but it's pretty awesome. I was Princess Leia in that fan film. Um, anyway, that really stirred something in me, and it took my mind into other places. And of course, I'm a big fantasy sci-fi fan of all different kinds of things. Watch lots of Star Trek. Got a few Star Trek artifacts here. Here's my recent. Here's my nightlight. Here's my Star Trek nightlight. You can't see it. Oh no, you can't see the pink. It glows. Anyway, that was from. I remember who gave that to me. Who gave that to me? Oh, Sam, my son. Here we go. I got lots of support around here. Um, so anyway, I saw that and I wanted to make movies, and so I immediately started researching the tech involved in that. And I had my little Video 8 camera, analog Video 8, not High 8, Video 8. You guys remember that? It was a Minolta thing. Remember Minolta? No, you don't, because they're gone. Anyway, as the whole roller coaster in this whole industry goes. But anyway, I started making little movies at home, and then I was able to obtain from my computery nerd brother something called an Amiga computer. Some of you will remember the Amiga computer, something called a toaster. And a toaster in the old days, or a Genlock in the old days, is something that's synchronized video to where you could have a piece of analog video going through, and then you could put graphics on top and make a cool sci-fi thing. So I made cool special effects on my computer, and you actually had to program using a programming language similar to Java, or maybe it's more similar to BASIC, to actually program your special effects using strings of a programming language. Anyway, all that crazy stuff, and I started making stuff, and I realized that I wanted to be able to tell stories. And so I was going to college, and I figured, you know what? If I'm going to go to college and major in something, I'm going to major in film, because that sounds fun, and that's what I want to do. So I ended up being a film major in college. I started an independent film project using, if you guys remember what DV is, in the old days, cameras came out, technology came out, and all the indie film guys thought that it was the future. Now they could compete with the big boys. And this is a DV camera. This is a small one, but people were making fan films on cameras this small through something called digital video, and it was so cool because you could import into your computer right from the tape. And I had a computer with a very expensive, I think 2 gigabyte hard drive. And now you get, of course, little flash drives that have, we can flash drives with a terabyte now, with 1,000 times the amount of space. And so I thought I was in, and all my film professors were telling me, you know what, Tom, maybe you need to learn a little bit more about cinematography. Maybe you need to learn a little bit more about editing, about storytelling before you jump in and spend a bunch of money and make your first film on DV. And they understood film formats, and they understood that making movies requires a different aspect ratio, different resolution. It's a whole different process that you go through to get something that looks like a movie. But I didn't listen because I knew better. And so I started making stuff on DV. And my brother and I were actually going to make a big feature film using DV, and we were really excited. And a camera came out called the Sony VX1000, and then the Sony VX2000, and the PD150. And these cameras were like cooler and cooler DV, and they were actually really quite impressive. And some people did make films with them. But there came a moment when I realized I don't know what I'm doing enough, and I need to wait and learn a little bit more. And so I did listen a little bit to a few people. But then a couple years out of film school, after I started getting into corporate video, which I'll talk about in just a second, then I decided I'm ready. Prematurely, I'm ready to make a movie, and I mortgaged my house and started my big indie film project. And I'll talk about that in a second. But one of my biggest first surprises, and this is going to really apply to anybody who's thinking about careers being creative, is you have in your head, like I had when I was a kid in high school and I was in college, I'm going to go to Hollywood and I'm going to be a film director, or I'm going to do what was that movie, The World of Tomorrow? The indie film. I can't remember the name. Maybe somebody on the stream is gonna mention this. Something and The World of Tomorrow. This crazy indie Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow. Thank you, Sam. So Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can do that. I can make a trailer in my basement, and people in Hollywood are going to give me $50 million to go make a movie. And I thought that. And I tried to do stuff like that, and I had it in my head that whether I'm going to go to Hollywood or indie road, this is going to happen to my career. And as we'll discover, I think when all of us tell our stories, is that is almost never what happens. But in my case, I found another career that was really interesting, that really surprised me. So right out of film school, I needed to get a job. I was getting married. And I needed to pay some bills, and so I got my first professional job as an editor. And so maybe lesson number one is remember you have a story and it's worth telling. That's lesson number one. But lesson number two is get some kind of technical skill, because at some point you're going to need to be hired to do something before you can be hired to be the creative mastermind of some big project. And so some technical skill, and I was a good editor, and so and I had learned on, my first editing was actually tape-to-tape editing in high school, where you edit from a videotape to a videotape, and it's a linear editing. So if you've heard of something like that, it's pretty cool. Um, but because I did so many indie type things on my little DV camera, um, and and I had experience, doing a lot of editing because you have to splice this together just to make something look good because you don't really know what you're doing. You're going to spend a lot of time uh, just kind of crafting things. So I was a pretty good editor, and I was happy to take. In those days, Avid was all the rage, and so I was very lucky to take an Avid class at my film school, and so I had some technical skill. And so anyway, I got my first job, and it was in a big corporation that sold health products. And you might be surprised to know that a huge amount of all film and video work that is done on Earth is done by corporations, and they will hire production companies. But more and more these days, just so you know, just as a career tidbit, is more and more they're finding that it's cheaper to bring those in house. And so some of the largest studios, I'm not talking Hollywood movie studios, but some of the largest studios producing content are actually in-house corporate video departments. Doesn't sound super exciting, but it's actually what I discovered. It can be a great way to feed a family and to pay your bills. And so you'd be very surprised how many jobs there are in that field, um, which greatly surprised me. I had no clue that was even a thing. So anyway, I got my first job as a video editor, and I was editing corporate videos. Editing how to make money selling vitamins videos, and that was not what I had planned on when I got out of film school. But my babies needed operations, and that is what paid those bills. And so thank goodness I had that technical skill. One thing I discovered, and I'll tell you just one really interesting story, is part of what corporations do is they produce also live events, and those live events involve speakers and they involve videos. And so in those live events, there is a huge amount of media work that happens. And so I remember when I was producing my first live show, where you've got thousands of people in a room, you've got huge budgets, you've got hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in this event, and it really is a show. It's not a movie. It's not the Hollywood movie that I wanted to make. But I remember I had this really interesting moment where I was the director of the show, because I progressed from being an editor to a producer, and then because the company needed someone who had it was willing to work crazy hours. I was able to produce some of these live shows, and that happened within a few years of me working as an editor. So now I was working as a producer of these vitamin videos, but also of their live shows. I remember there's this really cool moment where I was walking into the event arena where all this stuff was about to happen. I was looking around and seeing all these chairs, and it was all this energy in the air. There's all this pressure because you have this big live show happening, and there's video, and there's actors, and there's costumes, and there's a lot of stuff that you have in normal media that you would think of. And I remember thinking, this is kind of cool, because it's a very different type of event than I would ever think I would be producing, a very different type of experience that I think I was ever going to be producing. But I realized I'm actually kind of having fun. And even though no one can rewatch this ever because it is a live event, it's going to happen one time. Even though I can only do this one time, there's still a certain satisfaction. There's still a certain creative something. And even though it's not Star Wars, and I do sci-fi and fantasy mostly, and even though it's not those things, it was still something that was valuable to that audience. These are thousands of people who paid a lot of money to be here, and it's valuable to that audience. And that was actually kind of cool. And a lot of my creative ideas were there in the room, and that was neat. So I realized, wait, there are other careers in this field, and maybe there's a way that I can still be creative and have fun, even if I'm not doing my big Hollywood stories. And so that's lesson number 3: is there are creative opportunities out there for you that may not be exactly what you want, but you may discover, wow, this is cool, and this is challenging, and this is interesting, and and there's growth here. And because I have other priorities in my life, because by that time I guess I had 2 kids by that time, and this progressed, and I had more kids, but I realized, you know what, because those are my priorities right now, it's okay that I just wait before I make my magnum opus, sci-fi or fantasy thing. And I was still able to be somewhat creative doing that. And just for fun, let me see if I can share a screen with you really quick, just to give you an idea of, again, we're talking about money-making careers in the creative fields, okay? And I'm gonna see if that has, just one second, guys, I'm sorry. Let's see if that has It is not up yet. Well, you know what I can do? Okay, give me half a second. Give me half a second. I'm gonna pull something up right now, and then I'm gonna share it with you, and this will give you an idea. Here we go. Okay, and I'm gonna share the screen with you in just a second. Okay, um, so depending on your on your job and the opportunities you have in some fields that you don't think you're going to be in, even if you're in a field that you don't that you hadn't anticipated, you're going to find opportunities to let your personal creativity come out. It's not just going to be people telling you exactly what to do creatively. You're going to still have that creative opportunity. And so I'm going to actually play just a little quick video for you of something that I produced as a corporate video and event producer. And I'm going to share a screen here. Let's see if it works. No, hold on. Sorry. Here we go. Let's see if Discord helps me. Discord is helping me out, and you may have to do some kind of clicking to hear the audio, or whatever. I'm just going to zip through a little bit of this, and because we're streaming, it's not going to be perfect, but we're just going to give it a whirl here. So this is a live event performance that I produced that involves a lot of video, and it's actually sci-fi. So I got the company to do science fiction for their giant international event where we produce video, and I got to use a lot of my visual effects skills and do kind of sci-fi storytelling. And I'll just, so I've got robots, I've got space. So this is a live show using what's called augmented reality and virtual and projection mapping, to where you create illusions between the screens and between the characters on the stage. And so this is what you'll see a lot at Disney World and in other places where they combine video projection and live shows. And so so this is all sci-fi. I was able to do a bunch of really cool green screen shoots, visual effects, whatever. I got offered a variety of jobs because of this production that I did, and it's not amazing. It's not my big fantasy movie that I want to make, my big fiction movie that I want to make, but it's a lot of sci-fi, and it's not something you would typically see at a corporate event. And so I've even got hip hop dancing cyborgs. But guess what? I've got my cool hip hop dancing cyborgs, and they're introducing a big bottle of vitamins to the world. And so that you have the strange mix of your creative energies and the reality of paying the bills. So here's our new vitamins. And actually, this company is awesome. Their vitamins are actually awesome. I take them to this day. I don't work in this place anymore. So anyway, so that's Tom's sci-fi stuff introducing vitamins. And you have a huge arena full of thousands of people who are getting. And so that's just one example of being paid to be creative. And so I was paid, very well, and had a very good, secure corporate job, and I was being creative, not in the way that I wanted to. Well, one fateful day came about where I was producing an event. This was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Beautiful town. I was producing an event where there's a lot of dirty work involved in events. You got to set up lights, you got to set up staging, you got to run crews of people, making all this live stuff happen. It can be very tedious, all the wires and everything, all the lighting grids and everything like that. And if any of you involved in theater or live shows, there's a lot of work that happens before anybody shows up. And I remember myself and the producer that was working with me, we were, it was like a 20-hour workday, maybe 24-hour workday. I'm not sure, 30-hour workday, if that's something that exists, because you have to set up, run the show, and take down everything like that. This was a good buddy of mine named Rick, and we were wheeling a cart of gear out to the truck. And I said to my buddy Rick, I said, Rick, I do not want to do this for a living. And then he said to me, Tom, you do this for a living. And I had this moment of kind of black humor, dark humor at that moment, and I realized I really do this for. And I realized that even though that there was lots of great opportunities that went along with that with that career, I realized that I was drifting further and further away from what my dreams were as a kid. From when I watched Star Wars as a kid, I drifted quite a bit from that, and so then I made one of my very big mistakes along my journey is I decided to mortgage my house and make a feature film, and that movie is called 95ers. And in the end, it was distributed internationally, won a bunch of awards, and there's some fun stories that are associated with that. And it has a fan base, international fan base, and they're actual it's a time travel film. There's actual real time travelers who are fans of the film and know about it. So it's pretty exciting. But it began a period of many very dark years in my life because taking on a feature film that you're personally paying for is a very painful thing to do. And when you go into a huge amount of debt, when you have other responsibilities going, it's just when you have rosy ideas of how it's all going to turn out, when you're thinking Sky Captain World of Tomorrow, that's going to happen to me. That is very, very challenging, and you end up in a lot of trouble. And at some point, you can feel free to send me messages on, or you can Google 95ers, 95ERS behind the scenes. Or Google it or go to YouTube, and you see a bunch of very funny behind the scenes videos that show how I made the movie and all the things that went back and forth. A couple of just silly stories. It took us so long. We went bankrupt multiple times making that movie. And my wife, who's a beautiful actress, in fact, she's on this poster. If you can see her mouth. Anyway, that's her on the poster. She's an extremely talented actress, and she was the lead in the film. And the movie took us so long to make, and she's pregnant in the film, and that's part of the story. That in the movie, she's pregnant with two different people in the movie, same character. In the movie, of course, it's just one person. Because we went bankrupt so many times, and it was enormously stressful, and a lot of great lessons learned there. One of them is don't mortgage your house to make a movie. There are other ways to get into that field, and I'll talk about some of that stuff shortly. But there's other ways to get into that field to show people what you can do, to show people you're a storyteller, to get on people's radars. That will get you to where you want to go a little bit faster than spending, was it 8 years? I ended up spending, by the time we made the movie, by the time we had to reshoot it, by the time we ran out of money multiple times, by the time all the visual effects were completed and I did the marketing and got it in, obviously I didn't distribute it, but I got distributors, all this kind of stuff. All of that stuff, it was like a 5 to 8 year process, and it was extremely painful. And so anyway, some lessons I learned from that. Had I to do that over again, I wouldn't have made a feature film. I would have made a short film. And instead of me playing so many different roles in not acting roles, but so many different roles as far as producer and all the different million hats that I wore, I would have only worn a few of those. You have to wear multiple hats, and you have to expect some sleepless nights. But I would have just saved the money and hired consummate pros in most of those different roles. I ended up shooting a lot of the movie myself, actually, in my at 2 a.m. I would get back from work, and then I would have a car full of gear that I would either rent or get from the video department, because I was still working in corporate video. I would pack my little tiny car with kind of a clown car, just pack it with gear, and I would take the whole weekend and do pickup shots. And I used this magical thing. Anybody remember the Canon 7D? So technology had also evolved, and this movie shot this camera shot a lot of my movie. And because, again, as an indie film person, this is another good lesson is do be aware of all the different technology out there. And this was a bang for the buck, blew away anything else you could get. It had a sensors bigger than the Red One at that time. and so it actually did more cinematic shots in that sense. We did miniatures in that movie. We did full CG scenes in that movie. Another lesson, I don't know what lesson number we're on. I said I'm going to make a Hollywood movie on a micro budget indie budget, and that doesn't work. No matter how talented you are, and how many skills you have, no matter how much heart you have, you actually can't do that. What I could have done is I could have made a 1 minute short or maybe a 5 minute short that looked more like a Hollywood movie, and then get use that as my calling card rather than a full length feature film. So a lot of awesome lessons learned on that one. And just for fun, I'm going to share another screen with you really quick. So here, you're welcome to visit me on my website screen. So hold on one second. Share screen. Here's my website. Go live. Okay, so that is now going live, and I'm going to go over to it. Hopefully, you can hear some of the stuff. Anyway, here's some different projects that I either in distribution or completion or production. 90 Fibers was the movie that kind of almost broke me, and it was, but it got distribution, everything like that. When people ask you, did your movie make money? Yes, it made a lot of people money. It didn't make me money. I lost quite a lot of money on it, but it made a lot of other people money. So did it make money? Kind of. I'll show you just a teeny bit of the trailer, and we worked really, really hard on this film, and just kudos to everybody who was a part of this process.
In the future, guns and bombs don't win wars. The enemy must be taken apart, piece by piece, timeline by timeline. Ever since I was a little girl, I have been their enemy, because I have a special relationship with time. So now they're taking away the ones I love. But there are clues, a trail of echoes that only I can follow.
So what are they, Sally?
Onto their battleground.
Goes all the way back to the beginning. Someday you can prevent this.
We are running out of time!
Okay, so that is a crazy little movie that we made a few years ago. And let me make sure that doesn't pop up again. Okay, and so we put heart and soul into that movie. Every dime we had went into that movie. Every budget and Christmas vacation went into that movie. And there were parts that we shed a lot of tears getting through that process. And I guess maybe I was so hard-headed about what I thought my abilities were that I needed to go through that experience. But that leads me to one of the biggest tips that I can possibly give you, which is to be humble. And I wasn't humble going into that. I was nice, and I was, enthusiastic, and I was optimistic, and I was very creative, and I learned a huge amount of skills. I learned how to shoot, learned how to light, I learned how to do, very high-end visual effects. Some of the stuff in that, some of the shots that you saw took 60 hours to render a single shot. And that's going back and forth, putting kids to bed, going back down, adjusting a particle effect, going back up, and that for one shot. And so for about a year, I was, I don't want to make this big sob story because it was actually a huge blessing in a lot of ways. But the lack of sleep that you get, I'm going to pay for that, and other health issues or whatever, and certainly I missed out on some time with my kids, which I That's maybe the other biggest lesson is don't miss out on time with your kids. Um, but there's other ways to do it. I guess that's my point. There's other ways to do it. And what I would have done differently is I would have made a short. I would have hired pros and I would have spent all that money that I spent on that movie, or maybe I would have spent half of that money that I made on that movie, and I would have put it into a short. And I would have hired pros and got the right gear and gotten feedback and let people criticize my script and my story, and really thought more about distribution and who it's for. And most of all, I would have gotten a lot more advice. But because some of the advice that I was getting was don't do that or be careful, I didn't listen to that advice. And that's where you have to make a really careful judgment call. And this is so important for creatives who want to get paid to be creative. So you have to not listen to naysayers, but you have to take their feedback at the same time. And that's very hard to do because you don't want anything to get in your way, and because you just got to go for it. And that's true, but you need to go for it in a smarter way. And so if at least you can stop and think for just a second before you just blaze away, before you mortgage your house, stop and just ask yourself that question. Is this some feedback I really need to listen to? And hopefully you'll be able to feel the difference in your heart about that, because that is going to change. It's going to change the world, and it's going to save you so much time. So after I went through that process, and by the way, the movie is actually a pretty darn good movie. It's actually a sci-fi remake of A Christmas Carol, believe it or not, and it uses a lot of very great actual sci-fi concepts and real quantum physics. And so I actually love the feedback. It was on Amazon for a while, and it sold well, and it was streaming. It did a great job. It's currently out of distribution in the US, but it's going to go back in probably later this year. Anyway, so it's coming out with all the deleted scenes and everything. If you haven't seen it, you'll be able to see it. And you can find 95ers the movie on Facebook. Just like that page or whatever, and then you'll see when it comes out again. But anyway, but I kind of love the feedback I get, because we get like you'll see people giving it 1 star. This is so low budget, blah 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 blah. I know it is. It actually is low budget, And so you have all these people who hate it for that reason, because for some reason they didn't get the memo that it was an indie film. They thought it was like supposed to be a Hollywood film or something. Anyway, but then you get all these 5-star reviews from real sci-fi lovers and people and scientists who are like, this is the only movie that actually does time travel right, And so getting those reviews really just fills my heart with, because that was the audience that I was going for. And so that is great. The people who really know sci-fi and love sci-fi, those guys actually give it a really great review. So I'm okay with that. So don't be deterred by the low total average score. Look at the 5-star reviews if you're into sci-fi and fantasy, and you'll like 95ers. And also my wife got some great reviews herself as being so beautiful and doing such a great job. So anyway, 95ers. So after that whole process was kind of winding down, the next lesson that I'd love to share with you guys is I started realizing that collaboration kind of goes with humility. Collaboration is big. And so rather than trying to be always Mr. Cool, like I made a movie, I won all these awards or whatever, rather than doing that, I started just making more connections and just being more friendly and just reaching out, volunteering, not trying to be Mr. Cool all the time. And that's where one of my great life experiences comes in. So I'm a big fan of Comic-Cons, and with the first Salt Lake Comic-Con, I don't know what it's supposed to be called. Anyway, the Salt Lake Comic-Con, actually 95ers won award there, Best Visual Effects. Here we go, Best Visual Effects, Salt Lake Comic-Con, here it is, yay, okay. So I started just getting to know more people and just kind of broadening my network and just not focusing as much on my awesomeness and my auteurness. And so I was doing panels at Comic-Con. Of course, I do panels at FantasyCon and just different kinds of cons, whatever. And that's great, just collaborating with people and finding other professionals that I can talk to and get advice from. I do a panel with someone, and then right after the panel, I'm like, hey, can I give you a call? Are you contactable? Can I get your email address? because these people are so generous and so kind, and here I was a panelist with them, but I'm realizing, boy, this guy is so far ahead of me in his experiences and what I can learn from him. And so I started doing that. And I also volunteered. And so the Comic-Con year that they brought in the Star Trek The Next Generation crew, I'm a crazy Star Trek fan. And I love The Next Generation. And in fact, I'll be interviewing Melinda Snodgrass tomorrow night here at LTUE. She's the guest of honor, and she's one of the main epic writers. When Star Trek The Next Generation got awesome, that's the year she started writing for them. So I'm very excited to interview her. Anyway, so come back for that. But one of my great life experiences has to do with my beautiful wife. So I was volunteering for all the Star Trek: The Next Generation cast members, and William Shatner was also there. And I just wanted to get to know them because I'm hoping to hire some of them in the future. And I just wanted to get to know their personalities. And so I was just their gopher. And so I would get Coke for Jonathan Frakes, who plays Riker, if you remember him. He's a very talented director. He's directing a lot of the new Star Trek series episodes. Anyway, as goofy as you think he is, as far as Riker, he's which I think he's perfectly awesome as Riker, but some people poke fun at him a little bit. But he's actually a very fine film professional. Anyway, so I wanted to get to know them, and I'm a huge fan of Brent Spiner, etc. And William Shatner was there, and my wife walked to the front of the line where William Shatner was, and she kissed him on the forehead. She just said, "Get ready, Mr. Shatner." Okay, honey, actually, just lean in and tell me your Shatner line. Tell me your Shatner line. Right to the camera. Go ahead.
I just said, "Mr. Shatner, hold still." And I grabbed his head and smooched him. I had to seize the moment,
She did, and I don't recommend that, we don't want to breach people's boundaries or whatever, but for some reason, that just felt like the right thing to do. And so I can now say that I have kissed the lips that have kissed William Shatner. And that is one of my great life achievements. He was very, very, very sweet about that. Anyway, she got him to sign a 95ers poster. And so this is a treasured relic. And it says, "To Tom, William Shatner." And or something. I mean, this was his hand. So whatever that says is Shatner. And this, of course, Allie, this is my wife. This is our movie poster. Anyway, so that was a great experience that partly came from just a desire to start collaborating. It just started to kind of broaden my horizons. And since then, I've met so many wonderful colleagues. So I'm getting into novel writing as well, and all different kinds of things. I've met so many wonderful colleagues, and they're so helpful, and they're so kind. I was at another convention where I was teaching young. It's called Teen Author Boot Camp. It's pretty awesome. TABC. If your teen is into writing or whatever, go to it. It's fantastic. And there I was able to hang out with Brandon Sanderson and talk to him for a while and get his advice. And of course, you guys know who Brandon Sanderson is. And just as you start just networking and being cool and being friendly and helping other people. And at these cons, like I'm very committed to, even if there's only 2 people listening here, I don't know how many people we have in the room yet, but even if there's only 2 people here, it's valuable to me to save those 2 people time in their careers. And that has just turned into a wonderful, great collaboration, and so anyway, as you develop these skills, as you develop these connections, opportunities do come to you. And so, and some come out of the blue. Some are ones that you fight for and create. Some are ones that come out of the blue. So one that came out of the blue for me, because I had, through corporate video and through my movie 95ers and through just working hard, is I developed a great set of skills, a great set of technical skills. And so I got an opportunity to produce a TV pilot, that it didn't go anywhere, but it was called Teen Travel. It's actually an awesome show. And this opportunity came through my sister, who was in LA doing something for her career, and she met someone, and all these things happened. So I made a movie pilot or a TV show pilot. Awesome show, actually, but it never went anywhere. It didn't get picked up. But then 6 months later, that was now a calling card. And I gave that to a small television network called BYU Television. And then they hired me to produce a TV series called The Food Nanny. And then I did that TV series. There was lots of good things that happened there, but then that project went away. And then I went back to making corporate commercials and things like that. and then because I made certain connections with those people, then I had an opportunity to pitch TV shows again to that same network, and then they hired me to produce another TV series called Story Trek Trending, and that show we produced a year and a half ago, and we were able to snag 6 or 7 Emmys, and here are 3. And so this is very cool, very, 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 very fun to have this. But what's amazing about it is part of winning, awards like this, and now that opens up all kinds of career opportunities and things like that. Part of winning awards like that isn't because you're awesome and you made a great show. If you look back on the 20 year, or when I look back on the 20 kind of led up to that, I realized that really what it wasn't that I make great TV. What it is that I've just learned a bunch of lessons along the way, and I've met enough people along the way and developed enough good relationships that it just resulted in that. And so that's something just to bear in mind. It's one thing that because you're awesome, that is going to open up all these doors or whatever. What it really is it's a process of learning lessons and a process of doors opening. So one of the things that helped these doors open is that I eventually decided I had enough of these relationships, enough people who thought enough of my skills and my creativity to pay me money, that I was able to leave my corporate job. And I was a good 15 years at least doing an in-house corporate dude. And then I felt like, okay, now it's time that I think I have enough clients, enough job opportunities out there, people willing to pay me to be creative enough so that I can go on my own. And so I started my own studio, and the studio is growing at a surprising rate. And it's called Martian Studios, martianstudios.net. And Martian Studios produces all kinds we do posts for TV. We produce 1 or 2 web series. We do commercial work. And we have something very cool is coming up that we'll in just a second. But again, it's not because of you get to the point when you're awesome and that happens. What happens is it's a long, winding process. And for a lot of that process, I was doing the wrong thing, thinking I was awesome, thinking I knew everything, just dumping money into things, sacrificing things that should have been more important priorities. And so I'm hoping that everyone listening can avoid some of those things and take advantage of some of the really good things. And so one of the cool things that I discovered through all this stuff is that even though my first TV series that I produced got, crazy things happened with that, and it got, my role in that ended. Even the Story Trek Trending TV show only went 1 season, and then that ended. Some other I optioned a screenplay last year, and it was going into production, and then suddenly that was yanked, and that got pulled. So all these things that kind of, and my movie ended up costing me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And all these different kind of bad things happened, but the magic that was really happening is I was getting better at what I did. I was making great connections. People started trusting me. And then here's the magical thing that happens at the part of the journey that I'm in now, is that doors start to open because people need stories told, and they want those stories told by people that they trust. And so now what happens is doors open in surprising ways, where people actually seek you out. And that's that beautiful place. And I'm just starting in that place in my career. So it's taken a long time to get there. Hopefully you guys will get there a lot sooner than me. I'm a lot older than I look. It's the gel in my hair that's covering the white and gray hairs. But those magical doors start to open in really weird and cool ways. And I'll give you one example of that. So I pitched to BYU Television, which is just an awesome global network now. Really cool. I pitched them a million things. I pitched them a million TV shows. I pitched them a million radio shows. And so I went in to meet with all their radio people just like a year now. I can't remember how long it's been, but and very persistent pitching and until they finally will take a meeting with me. But here's a very strange thing that happened. So, and this particular meeting happened, I can't remember, like a year ago. So I went in with a million different shows that I thought would be perfect for their audience. And then I snuck one in there that I just absolutely loved, that I thought was no chance in the universe that they would be interested in. which is like a full-blown Stranger Things-esque science fiction radio drama. I love old school radio. Google X-1, just Google X-1 old time radio, and it will be the best present you've ever given to yourself. It's a whole series of the old school radio from the 40s and 50s, where they do all the voices and the music and the sound effects, everything like that, and you get this whole wonderful sci-fi experience. Absolutely delightful, and you get it for free. Anyway, X-1. Google it now. You will not be, actually Google when we're done, but you will not be disappointed. Anyway, so I developed this big series for first as a novel, first as a movie, then as a novel, then as a television series, and then I redeveloped it for radio to be an old time radio drama. So anyway, so I went in, I pitched all these things to their top radio people, and they were like interested in everything, and they looked at me and they said, Tom, of all these, what is the coolest one to you? Which one do you want to do? I'm like, which one should I tell them? Should I tell them the one that they think is going to be, that I think that they think is the coolest, so I can get hired? Or should I just be honest and tell them the one that I think is, I said, well, the sci-fi. And they said, well, that's the one we like better too. And it just blew my mind. It was a door again open, not because I was awesome, or not even because I had a great idea for a story, though it is pretty awesome. We're so excited about what's going to be happening with it. But it was because of 20 years of learning hard lessons and building relationships. And so anyway, so they ended up purchasing that whole series, and I wrote 400 pages of script and all this kind of stuff, and it's wonderful. But that was the first time that I had sold without me kind of pushing it on people. Other than the movie obviously sold in fans with that. But as far as just selling outright my science fiction that someone had requested, that was my first big contract. And I was paid for that. It was very, very nice. And that is a special moment when you kind of cross that threshold, where now people are reaching out to you to ask you for your sci-fi and fantasy. And I know for the LTUE audience, that's a pretty exciting thing. So anyway, so that's where we are today. And so this year, plan is correct, and you're going to have an awesome new bit of sci-fi to enjoy. So anyway, those are some winding roads. Before I get my guests into their cozy seats, we'll just see really quick if there's any question that has popped up that is one that I can answer first, and then I'll get Sam and Jeff in here to join us. I have Mike Bishop, who is helping us out, can read me. Okay, Mike, hit it. Go for it.
Okay, question from Peggy.
Can they hear you?
Yeah, they can hear me.
Okay.
How old is too old to get into film and TV?
How old is too old to get in film and TV? Peggy, I would say you are never too old. Absolutely not. I would say that there's no limit to that. It kind of depends on what fields you want to go into. If you want to get into it as an actor, there are roles for everybody at every age. However, it does constrict. I mean, the horrible thing about the film and video industry is that, unfortunately, women, as they get better at their profession over time, there are actually less roles for them over time, and that is a tragedy. And that's just unfortunately the way it is. We need more storytellers to tell more stories for people who are older. That's somewhat true for men, but not nearly as much. Not nearly as true for men. But as far as all the other roles in film and video, I actually would love to collaborate with people who are older. A lot of people, but I love collaborating with people who are older because they've learned epic things called reliability, which the young people don't always have as much of. And one thing that you'll learn in this industry, the currency in the creative fields, in my opinion, and maybe Jeff or Sam will contradict me here, but the most important currency, well, you have a bunch of currency: talent, needs of the market. Money is a huge bit of currency in this industry, but the number one, trust. If people trust you, they will work with you. And so as you hear all the tips that we're giving and you go through all this stuff, then you will, as you apply those things, you absolutely can. And especially if you want to get into as a writer, and my goodness, we need stories. And oh my goodness, we need stories told by older people. Please, we need those stories. I lament sometimes the younger generation of writers sometimes don't spend enough time studying history or studying art or studying whatever they need to be studying to write. I think stories maybe that they could if they just did a little bit more of that. So Peggy, rock and roll. We definitely need writers, but we same principles. The other thing about being older is that perhaps you are not as financially in trouble as a young person. And so if you already have the ability to be paying your bills a little bit more than someone like me who was just getting married and I had a house payment and kids and all this kind of stuff, then maybe you'll have more of an ability to put time into that process. And so I think you are not too old. I don't know how old you are, but you are definitely not too old to get involved. But you are going to be spending some time experimenting with stuff. And so someone I mentored who now is a well-paid creative director in my company, someone I mentored 15 years ago, she came to me and she said, "Okay, Tom, I want to do this as a career. What do I do?" And I said, "Okay, here's what you have to do. You need to call every production company in town, in the entire area, within 100 miles, and tell them you will work for free. You want to work for free, doing whatever they want you to do. And then over time, they will call you and they will offer to pay you to do whatever they want. And over time, you're going to develop a resume and you're going to get a job that is going to train you and do all the training that you need done. And then if you keep working hard and get your technical going and have your network going and are friendly and kind to people and reliable, then you're going to get paid a lot more money to do that thing. And that is exactly what happened. And so she exactly volunteered for free. She asked for free internships at any place they would take her, and she got them, and then they paid her. And now I am very lucky to rely on her to direct a third of the content that I produce at Martian Studios. And so it is pretty awesome. So you are not too old. You are going to have to do a little bit of winding path, but you're definitely not too old. So that is an awesome question. Thank you, Peggy. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to invite our magical, mystical guests up to our stage here. And I have sitting on my, whichever side he wants to be on, the magical, mystical Sam Payne. And we have the mystical and magical Jeff Parkin. And so what I want, Sam, I'm going to have you scoot maybe toward more of your edge of your seat, just so our camera. So yeah, you can just kind of lean in just a little bit. Our lovely Mike. Being directed. Our lovely mic is on Omni. No, we're good. Our lovely mic is omnidirectional, so it's actually picking us all up just great. And so what I wanted to do is let Sam introduce himself just a little bit. I'm very lucky to be working with Sam on some projects coming up, and Sam has thousands and thousands. So dovetailing into the theme of how to get paid to be creative, Sam has been paid to spend thousands and thousands of hours telling awesome stories on the radio, and that is just, it's a beautiful and enviable, wonderful career, wonderful things with that. But just the idea of how do you get from where you were, from wherever that was before you started doing that, to where you are, where it's a job. It's a job where you get to tell stories, and you can feel free to talk to me and Jeff and to the camera. So however you want to circulate your attention is great.
Well, just very briefly, because I assume we'll have more time to sort of elaborate on some of these things. Very briefly, when I was a little kid, my grandmother, who was a kindergarten teacher, got for Christmas or something a copy of Robert Fulghum's book, All I Ever Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, right? And I remember just reading the back flap of the book, a little bit about Robert Fulghum. And Robert Fulghum talked about himself in that back flap information about how he had been in the clergy and how he had been a school principal and how he had been a million things. And I thought, how could a person be all those things, And I kind of, that's kind of the life I wanted, I wanted to do a lot of different things. And as it turns out, I've kind of done a lot of things. I've been a songwriter, I've been an on-stage performer, I've been a school teacher, I've been a school principal, I've been a media guy, I've been a writer in a number of different. When I was in my mid-20s, I guess, somebody who knew me as a songwriter asked me if I would sort of curate their Sunday music programming on a very local station. And I started doing that. He had asked me to do it because he knew my work as a songwriter, and he knew that I knew a lot of people that we were playing on. And so I started doing that. But I told him, I said, I'm not interested in just being a DJ. What I am interested in is doing some writing and production and bringing some storytelling to this Sunday experience. You know? So I started writing a little, really little homilies is all they were. These 5-minute sort of personal experience, feel-good pieces for the radio. And
when you asked him to, you told him you wanted to do that, was he like, okay, let's do it? Or was there? Okay,
he was like,
he was
okay,
open to it.
Which was very, very fortunate for me, because a person who is trying to reach an audience on a radio, the corporate entity, that's not an obligation that they have to say to the guy who says, well, this is what I would do, to say, well, okay, go for it. But that's what happened. And it was a great boon to me, and I started writing for radio. And I wound up sort of in the background of some of my other professional pursuits, doing that kind of storytelling and that kind of curation for like 15 years on that stage.
So if I might turn that into a quick lesson for the audience. So you actually thought of a way to add value to that program. Or was it just?
I think it was more like, I'm not interested in this unless I get to do this.
Okay, cool.
And so they allowed me to do that. And again, it was happening in the background. A lot of stage performance and a lot of educative, ventures and a lot of other things. But I did that for a very long time. Almost immediately after the guy hired me to do that, he was let go. There was a big corporate change, and he was let go. Fast forward 15 years. And he is now the head of radio at BYU Broadcasting, and calls me and says, we're interested in a storytelling venture here on BYU Radio. I'm still doing all of the other things that I've ever done. But he said, we were interested in having you come and take a look at this project. And in I came, and that has led to what I'm doing now, which is BYU Broadcasting kind of miraculously has decided they want to invest some resources in this kind of storytelling on the radio. It's in some ways it's innovative, and some throwback to what's been happening on the radio, time out of mind. But it's terribly exciting. It gives me an opportunity to do a lot of the things I love to do, and that's how I make my living.
That is so cool. And we're gonna get into that a little bit more now. Before we go to Jeff, tell me your top 2 bits of advice for people. I mean, you've obviously interfaced with all, okay? Yeah. The top 2 things that you've seen or you've experienced, or you've had to learn that get people to want to pay you to be creative.
Well, I think just in terms of principle, right? I always answer the phone, and I always raise. Right. I mean, my career has sort of grown very organically those couple of principles, right? Okay. If I'm in a room of people and somebody says, well, we need somebody to do this creative thing, I always raise my hand. Okay. And again, I always answer the phone. I was on a trip with a bunch of high school students. I was for a while a high school principal, and I was with some performing arts students in New York. And we were having a great time, and we were experiencing a lot of workshops. I was with a bunch of dance students and a bunch of theater students and a bunch of music students. And we had booked out this studio space in just off Times Square. And we were going to run a number of different workshops for these Broadway, performers were coming to work with the dance students, and there were people coming to work with the theater students, and the music connection in New York canceled. And so I went to the music students and I said, listen, you can either go to one of these other workshops, or we can, we've rented studio space. Why don't just us, me and you music students, go and kind of take this studio space and just do some writing. Let's write some songs, And the students, dart in their hides, they just said, we're not really feeling the muse, man. We'll go to the dance workshop, right? And they went to the dance workshop and had a great time. And I went and sat in an empty studio with a view of the Chrysler Building or something, some iconic building in New York, and wrote a song for a client and came home, sold it for a couple of grand.
Okay.
I mean, the principle there is I just feel like I got to take every opportunity I can to do the things that I love.
Right.
Okay. I mean, and I gotta do it with whether the music.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sam, go and take a couple of backstage photos for us. Now that story reminds me of something that's going to cause Jeff to shake his head. Okay, so occasionally I have the opportunity to speak in front of university classes, right? And so because here's this guy who went to film school here or whatever, and now he's now making a living, whatever, and he's so he's going to tell you what he's learned. So kind of something similar to what we're doing right now. And at the end of those classes, whether I'm talking to illustration students, because I do animation, so whether it's art students or whether it's film students or writers or whatever, at the end of my little vaunted little lecture or slideshow, I'm like, so everybody here, you're welcome to contact me. Like you can send me your and you guys too, the audience here, go to tomdurham.com, contact sheet, and I will answer your emails. Or if you go to martianstudios.net, it'll take you to my studio's Facebook page, which. Thank goodness we haven't needed to advertise yet. So the site is not up. Our reels are all old. We've been very fortunate to not have to advertise yet. I'm sure we will soon. So there's nothing fancy there at all. But you can send a message to that page, and someone from the company will respond. Anyway, I go to these classes, and at the end of the classes, I say, number one, does anybody have any questions? And a couple people have a question. Most of them are just on their phones or paying attention. And I say, okay, well, all of you are welcome to send me your reels, your demos, your resumes, your portfolios, and I regularly hire people to work for me. Okay.
You probably get tons of them, don't you?
I get like one. And guess what I do with the one that I get it from? I hire them. Okay. Everyone that has reached out to me from one of those university classes, I have hired them. I have given them money to be creative. And it boggles my mind that the other ones in those classes are not flooding me with their email. It just blows my mind. If there's been a couple who have reached out, I have definitely spent time with them, helping them with their careers. So either I've given them my time, which I feel is pretty valuable, or I have actually paid them. And right now, I have I've got 4 or 5 employees, and then I have a bunch of independent contractors, and many of them are from the same university that I came from, but it wasn't from. It was later, they got out of school and they're desperate all of a sudden, it's like now you're competing with 500 other people who are better than you. And so it's like, okay, it's harder. Anyway, so the opportunities you get, like the Chrysler Building, that's an awesome story. And again, Jeff, I know you help those students daily. But then I look back. So when I was a film student, the wonderful dean or head of the brought in a guy who had graduated and who had made good. And he was not in LA, but he was working for a big Canadian movie distribution company. And I was the same guy. At the end of it, he said, "Does anybody have any questions about this?" And he said, he was very open about it. And I was that moron who did not reach out to him. And I guarantee you, had I, because I am skilled and talented, I am hard working and whatever. Had I reached out to him, and if I worked that connection and just begged him for a job or something like that, he probably would have given me one. And I'm not joking here. I probably could have saved 5 years of time and real pain. I'm not real pain. Because creatives, as you know, whether you're an author or a filmmaker or whatever, it is painful to get to where you're getting paid. There's so much rejection and so much challenge with that. So anyway, I could have avoided that had I just talked to people and listened, and raised my hand. Or if I'm the Chrysler, what am I doing? A dance workshop? I mean, oh goodness. Oh wow!
Props to the dance workshop. Certainly.
No, for sure. Those kids were getting great stuff. No.
I'm with you. For some, it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not going to miss this opportunity, whatever it looks like.
Right.
And
exactly.
and of course, not only did I sell the song, but I wound up having that terrific experience in a New York studio by myself.
So cool. Cool. Yes, no offense to the dance people. In fact, in college, I tried to be a professional dancer and I failed miserably. So no offense to those people. All right, so Jeff, tell us. So we're talking a little about school, and so when I got done with film school, I was like, I am out of here. There's no point. This is me being foolish or not. You guys decide. I was like, I'm out of here. There's no point to like. This was in my head. There's no point. I'm just gonna go show them how awesome I am with this whatever movie or what thing I'm gonna make. I'm gonna go make it big because I'm that guy. And so I left school as soon as I could. And I started working as soon as I could. And I started doing it immediately. But a lot of people have had phenomenal careers, actually going where they go to LA. They go to LA. They go to school. People who make movies go to school, and all different kinds of things happen. So I thought it was so important to have Jeff here with us because he took more of that route, and you illuminate that for us and tell us what worked about what didn't. So tell us your story. You are a creative professional today. Tell us your venture.
Yeah. Excuse me. So when I was about 8, I had a substitute teacher in 5th grade, somewhere thereabouts, and she one day said, "We're gonna watch," and I was excited, and we went down the hall into this cafeteria, and the cafeteria is kind where you fold all the tables out and everything, but all the tables were pushed away. We all sat on the floor, and her son was there, and he was in high school, so not a ton older than I was, and he had this just little Super 8 movie projector set up, and he showed us this movie, and I just sort of blew my mind, and I thought, wait a second, I can make movies because I love to tell stories. I've been telling stories since I was a kid, which you guys have been doing too. And so I went home, and we have this little Kodak Instamatic camera that was just this, just a box, and started making movies, and did that all the way through high school, went to college, and then transferred at a certain point to USC, University of Southern California, and wanted to go to film school there. Applied once, did not get in, and then I found out they didn't accept sophomores, and so that's what I was, and so I applied again, got in, and had some just phenomenal classmates and professors, and as I was getting ready to graduate, one of my mentors, a guy by the name of David Howard, reached out and he said, "Hey, we would really like to have a graduate screenwriting program." And I thought, I've never even thought of going to grad school. That just seems sort of dumb. I mean, you guys are talking about grasping opportunities when they show up. And I talked to my dad, who's a physician. So he went to a few years of school beyond undergraduate. And his response was, you can never have too much education. And I think that's actually true, and not just formally. I think, Tom, you've been talking about how important it is to keep learning things, and I think always recognizing there's so much we don't know. So I did the graduate screenwriting program at USC just by invitation, and I said, I am horrible at standardized tests. I don't want to take the GRE, and they said, just you have to take it to get into USC. We don't care what your score is. So that was a good thing. So I got into the graduate screenwriting program and then worked professionally in Los Angeles for about almost 20 years, and then did TV and music videos and ice cream truck safety videos, all the stuff, right, that we do. And then a number of things kind of happened where I felt like I was supposed to teach, and I wasn't very happy about it. Because I still wanted to continue to make stuff, which gratefully I have been able to. I interviewed for this job, called a friend and said, "Don't you tell anyone I'm asking you this." And he said, "We actually posted a position yesterday," and all of these pieces kind of fell into place. And so being where we are has been something that's been the right thing for us and our family. But gratefully, I've been able to continue to create and done stuff with BYU Broadcasting and made several feature films, some web series, and documentaries, and lots of cool stuff.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. And so, when you first, had those aspirations to be a creator using film as your medium, would you ever have imagined that you'd be teaching?
No, no.
So tell us about that, because one story that I told before you got here was that so my first job out of film school was as a corporate video editor, and then I quickly started producing their live shows and all that kind of stuff. And there was a weird moment where I was like, this is kind of cool. There's thousands of people in the room. There's video, and there's props, and there's actors, and there's costumes, and and I'd never imagined that would be of any interest to me. But there is this kind of, when you have your first movie premiere, which I've had that moment, where there's something very weird and funky and cosmic and electric of like having a movie premiere. I'm in a theater with my film, and there are people here watching. There's this moment that's its own thing, right? And then I had that own thing where when I produced one of these big shows, it's a different thing that it was wonderful again, and I told those stories about how I transitioned to do that anymore. But for you, is there a certain something just to expose more careers where to be paid to be creative? You could be teaching, you could be doing radio, you could write, you could be writing. It's all different kinds of things you could do. Can you tell us about that? About maybe some of the satisfaction you get out of a career you didn't expect that you're getting paid for?
Yeah. One of the great things about working with students is they keep you young, and they always come in, and I essentially teach same 3 classes every semester. One is a screenwriting class, one is a directing class, and the other is an advanced directing. And it is so cool to have them come in and pitch an idea to you, and you think, that is really interesting. And things I encourage my students to do is be really personal in their work, and to try and tap into their own experiences, not necessarily to tell those specific stories, but ways to emotionally tap into their journey. And that's really fulfilling to me. That's really exciting. And gratefully, I've been able to, so I can bring that into the classroom. I try and always hire students on professional stuff that I do, because I think it's fun for them to see me work. And it's also fun for me to kind of go by and see the set and just check in with them and see how they're doing, see if they have. And that's pretty rare for production assistants. Generally is what they come in as, to have an opportunity to interact with the director. But the teaching aspect of it is really exciting, and it's fun to see lights go on for students, and it's fun to be able to watch them premiere their work to an audience. And so yeah, it's one of those things I never expected, but it's been a real blessing.
That's awesome. And then I'll ask you the same question in just like Sam, about what was the most unusual thing you got paid to be for, and whether it was horrible or gratifying, so be going through the database for that story. So Jeff, are there top 2 or 3 bits of advice, lessons, tips of what you would say, whether you've learned it or of how people can wind their way to get paid to do this thing that they love?
Yeah, I tell my writing classes that if you're going to be a writer, you need to write, because that's actually, it turns out, what writers do. And I, at least I've observed this. I think it's so important to just be creating all the time. I mean, the great thing for filmmakers is we've got these now. I mean, this is an amazing little thing. This has got 3 lenses. And you can go out and shoot little films all the time. You can be constantly writing screenplays. Stuff doesn't have to be premiered on a big screen. You can show it to your friends. The cool thing about today is that you can post stuff online. And so that's probably my number 1 piece is just keep doing the work. And if you'll do the work, you'll discover stuff in the process that will, it enriches your own creative and emotional life, just making stuff. Mm-hmm. And so don't wait for somebody to say, I'm going to pay you to do a thing. I mean, actually a really good example of that, Tom. You just went out and I'm forgetting the name of your first sci-fi feature.
95ers, yeah.
95ers, right? That you like. How long did it take you to make that? 5 years or something like that?
Yeah, off and on.
Off and on.
5 years.
Yeah.
I told them the good and the bad of that long story, but that's right.
Yeah, but this is the good right here.
Yeah.
This house, all these things are the good. And so you had a desire to tell a story, and you just went out and made it happen, and you didn't wait for somebody else to come and say, okay, we're going to give you all this. Sometimes if you wait, you'll just keep waiting, making stuff. So make stuff. That's my number one rule.
I love it. So Sam, anything where you surprised you got for, and what it felt like?
Well, I'm going to answer that question in this way.
Please.
When I was in high school, there was a family that moved into town. The 16-year-old son in that family was interested in making movies. He always had an enormous camcorder on his shoulder. It was, his name was Rocco de Villiers. Rocco decided that he was going to gather a couple of us, a handful of us, and make a movie. And he knew that I was class, right? And so he said, "Well, you'll write it then." So I wrote this movie with Rocco, and he got a bunch of army fatigues and put them on a bunch of his pals, and away we went into the wilderness around our town, and spent a summer shooting this army film. And it was about 40 minutes long, and we tackled it with all our hearts and souls. We'd go out and do this all day, and then we'd go home and scrub up and go on triple, quadruple, quintuple dates, and then we were always together and kind of always making this stuff. And then we rented a theater. We put all our friends in it. We were in charge of making the film, distributing the film. I mean, all of those things, everything that, from beginning to end, that was just us. And that venture, right, as ridiculous as it was, we can hardly watch it now without it was ridiculous, but it was the most fun we'd ever had, and has led to many of the professional opportunities that we are now having. Rocco, certainly, me,
he's a great filmmaker.
All of us kind of trace our roots back to this crazy project we did in high school. And so that was kind of a surprising project, but I can go even back. The principle that I would kind of draw to the fore with that is, as a little kid, I wanted to be a writer. Dad had published, and I thought, that's what I want to do. And so he would talk to me about the long road toward, whatever would happen between the time I was 9 and the time I was an adult. And I was like, no, I want to write something and publish it now. And my dad said, listen, write something on the typewriter that we just got you at the thrift store, and we'll go down to the local supermarket because they got a copy machine, and we'll make a bunch of copies, and we'll staple it between construction paper covers, and you take your red wagon and try to sell it to the neighbors. And I didn't do it, and it's actually like the biggest professional that when I was 9 years old. I started to write the piece. In fact, I still have a couple of pages of this old detective novel that I started to write, and I love it. It's one of my treasured possessions, But back then, I didn't think that work counted, and that's a principle that I would draw to the never discount any of the work that you do. We spend so much time thinking this work is not important. The work I do later will be important, But I in a very practical sense, I can't count the number of times that I've gone back to the well of previous work to draw something forward that I can use now in a lot of really practical.
I love that. Now, those are, I'm sure we all have those stories. Those are, so real quick, just for the audience, anytime you guys, at this point, whenever you guys want to ask a question, feel free to type it into the question thing or whatever. And then Sam or Mike, feel free to interrupt us just so we can start answering specific questions for people. We're going to keep talking and telling stories, but if either directly for Sam or for me or for Jeff or for all of us, or about the cosmos of creativity or whatever, let us know. That reminded me of a story. So I was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was really worried that that 2-year commitment was going to derail my career, because I was ready. I was going to go to film school and I was going to change the world. I was going to get funded for $50 million or whatever, or even $2 million, which was a lot better these days. And so right before I left, I went on this explosive writing, phase where I wrote a spec episode to Star Trek Voyager. And I was a huge, I'm a crazy Star Trek fan. I'm a nutty Star Trek. And so I spent, I don't know how long, studying the show, and it was in the old days, and some networks allow this still, but very, very rare. But in those days, normal humans submit.
Yeah. Star Trek.
And and it was so, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be part of this magic, whatever. And so I wrote actually a pretty darn good teleplay, a pretty darn good Star Trek screenplay, and I submitted it. And then while I was on my mission, my brother sent me the rejection letter, and it was just this, it was really kind of this beautiful, it was actually a pretty good episode. I mean, it's actually a pretty good episode. But like, I really do treasure that, and you mentioned something about kind of on the same thing of just treasuring those moments. You have you can tell a story. You can, writers should be writing. You have an opportunity to do that, and that brings up just one other little topic here that is going to be a significant career component for people, which is to diversify or to specialize. So what I did, and in my life, I feel like it was a mistake, though it did pay the bills, is when I got out of film school, I actually diversified my skill set, because I wanted to get more and more jobs, and I wanted to climb the ladder and all this kind of stuff. And so I was a very good editor, but then I learned, I started with motion graphics, and then I started doing a lot of visual, and then I started directing and doing the events, and then I would do videos, and then I would, I even did, in the old days, like my own Foley work with sound effects. And I remember just sitting there with this mic and dirt and like a bunch of garbage, and just make, on the old Nagra, audio recorder, or whatever. And so, and that served me well, because and people wanted someone who could do it all, right? And so promotions and things, I had my corporate 10 years of excellence award, which is great. And again, the company great, and that is to make fun of it, but it wasn't where I wanted to go in my career. But yet it paid the bills, and then when I was working on an indie film, I was like, if I can't get my lighting guy, if I can't afford him, which I can't, I'm going to light it, and so that was great. But there's a whole nother school of thought on to specialize. And so my deepest heart of heart love is writing. And so, someday I just want to retire on an Irish beach writing novels or poetry or something like that, right? And so I often think, man, what if I had specialized and just right out of film school, I worked at the grocery store, or whatever, or maybe as an editor, and just either written screenplays or novels, and just started that process 20 years ago. And so anyway, there's schools of thought on that. I have an opinion on that, because it's a huge career question for these people. And you've done a million things. On my website, on tomdurham.com, there's actually a great blog post about this, about to diversify or specialize. Just click around and you'll find it. So anyway, tell us about that, Jeff. About, what do you tell your students? What have you seen? What is the good and bad of diversifying versus?
That's a really good question. And I think it probably varies a little bit from individual to individual. There are some people who seem to only be able to do one thing. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like someone's a cinematographer. They can't write their way out of a paper bag. They can't direct, but good grief, they know how to make an image. And if that's the case, I'd say lean into that. I think being able to also pay your bills is important. And there's something to be said for paying your bills in an area that you love. The one thing I think is a little challenging doing that with what we do is production is so time and labor intensive that sometimes what happens is you sort of get into the corporate world and you end up spending all this time doing it, and days are long. And I heard you say, Tom, that there were some things you felt like you overlooked at the time, and I have similar regrets for some of that. But then you have your own projects, and it's really hard. You come home and you're just exhausted, and you think, I'm just too tired tonight. But tomorrow, for sure, I'm going to sit down and write that great sci-fi masterpiece. And so, but on the other hand, I kind of joke that film school prepares you to work at Taco Bell because, you know, if you can't go out and make movies, then it's hard. But I'm just teasing on that because I actually think film school, I've got a lot of students who finish film school and they actually don't want to make movies, but they're super good at like logistical stuff and organizing and working with other people. And there's lots of ways that we tell stories. And so, you know, I don't know if I totally have an answer to that. I see the benefits on both sides, and I don't know. It's probably just pretty individual, maybe. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I've always for people who could focus up and figure out the thing that they wanted to pursue, and be single-minded about that, and develop a career around that. And I've had a lot of admiration for people like that. I am not that person, and I have never striven to be that person, right? Because, I mean, I'm the guy who looked at the Robert Fulghum book and said, I want to do all of those things, you know? And so as a result, I haven't denied myself the pleasure of 1,000 hours on stage as an actor. I haven't denied myself the pleasure of 1,000 hours on stage as a songwriter or as a writer of one kind of thing or another, or as a radio person. And one of the things, if there's, and frankly, I've probably missed out on some of those career benefits that flow to somebody who is single-minded, you know, and who can brand themselves in a way that's you know, singular and easy to understand, and creates a really sharp, clear path for them, you know. On the other hand, in my office, if somebody says, well, we need somebody to write something, they say we need somebody to score something, I can raise my hand. If somebody says we need somebody to be the voice behind this, I can raise my hand. And I love all of the opportunities.
Well, maybe there's a way I can synthesize this into a rule of thumb that you could experiment with. I don't know, give it a shot. But maybe I would say, unless you want to be a super diverse, you know, media producer of some kind, and you like all, maybe the way to look at that is specialize as soon as you can. You know, unless you want to do all the, and some people do. I know multiple filmmakers who they actually just really want to do it all. And I'm a huge fan of Shane Carruth. So Upstream Color, if you're an indie filmmaker, you start with Primer and then did Upstream Color. The guy is an auteur. He really does it all, including the music. But he loves it. And you can tell that whether you like the movie, if you're here at LTUE, you need to go watch Upstream Color. But what you'll see is even though the cinematography isn't Bill Pope, you know, who shot The Matrix, right? It's not. But you can see that there is love in every single frame. The story, the sound, the acting, everything. And he acts in it too. And so the guy's a nut. But that's what he does. And studios have tried to hire him, and he doesn't want to be hired. He wants to do his own. I don't know what he's doing now, but he does his own thing. And so if you like that, that's wonderful. Do it. And technology's become so inexpensive now to do cool stuff. Do it. But I would say that, you know, for me, I've had to pay my bills, and so and unfortunately, when someone thinks video guy, they think someone who can do all of these things, and they don't realize that means 10 people, and it's very expensive to hire 10 people at whatever that day, you know, just multiply day rates, right? So if they get one guy to do it, okay, well, that in theory can save them money. but I would say specialize as soon as you can. And so I'm specializing 20 years later than I thought I would. But now finally, because I was able to get the studio going and all those kinds of things. Now I'm able to just work on creative projects, and as the company starts paying its own bills and things like that. And so I now can start to specialize. But some of my film school buddies, they're making some of them are making 10 to 20,000 a day because they went out of film school. And that's all I do. And I'm going to hire people who are this and all their other categories so that whatever I do is freaking amazing. Okay, it's just amazing. And these guys are making thousands and thousands a day as their day rate, whether they're a DP or a director. And that's what they do. It's harder for screenwriters. I don't know a lot of my film school colleagues who are just hitting, scripts out of the park, left and right. Screenwriters, in my experience, tend to have to do more things, but again, Brandon Sanderson, you people know who that is. He took a security job out of college and just wrote his books, and then he did it. He hardcore specialized. So ponder that. I mean, but maybe that's a half decent rule of thumb.
It's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. And so anyway,
for sure you got to get good at.
Yeah, for sure.
That's got to be part of your.
Yeah,
for sure you got to do that.
And sometimes I think do a lot of things, you start to realize what you're good at and what you enjoy, and then you start to just kind of gravitate that direction, and you specialize too.
Yeah.
Because I love editing, but I don't like to edit all the time. But sometimes it's actually really therapeutic for me to edit, but I can give really good editing notes to an editor. And I was going to say, I would think both of you guys can do that. And you listen to the score, Sam, and you think, oh, maybe there's just a little tweak we could make right here. And you can articulate what you're thinking in a way that a composer could understand.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe here's that other extension to that, which is there was a time, and this goes to the whole humility thing. And again, I just paid a heavy price for being thick-headed and prideful and a stinker. And so in the old days, whether I was shooting or whatever I was doing, I had it in my head, I have to be the best at it, And so if one of my colleagues was like doing I'm gonna be the cool guy at that thing. And now, again, it's taken me a while to just wipe that stupidity out of my head. And now I actively seek people who are better than I am in these different areas, and oh my goodness, how has opened up the cool stuff that I do now. I'm like, now I'm like, please, I want anybody who is great at this, because, as soon as I empower them and give them, I'm a director and producer, so I have to give them they get the job done, but they're way better than I am. And there's certain things that I'm really good at, and now I'm like, hey, this is stuff that I'm going to really spend my creative time on. I'm going to do the writing and the directing, but these people are so much better than me. I have wonderful editors who work for me, and it's like, if I can stay out of that, then my goodness, they're going to make me money, and they're going to do a better job. The graphics people, the visual people, DPs, oh my goodness, that was my huge, at least for all you people who are interested in film.
What's a DP?
Director of photography. Thank you. Gosh, if I had just realized how magical a DP and a gaffer is, the guy who lights the scenes, is that the difference between what I would make, whether it was a commercial or whether it was a movie, the difference between what I would put together and with what the pros put together, the difference was they had a gaffer who was a pro. That was, I mean, oh my goodness. And if it's hard to do with that, is probably the best money you can possibly spend, because that is what makes it look like a professional show versus a non-professional. And so that's where you have to decide, am I going to specialize or not? Am I going to go and just hire these amazing people, or am I going to go ahead and learn how to do it myself? But that magic there and that humility there is what will, give you that edge of what makes it.
So I appreciated so much what you said earlier in the hour about collaboration. I learned a lot of what I learned in my days as a band leader, right? And you find yourself kind of myopic vision about what you want the music to sound like, and you start describing that. I mean, I found myself just feeling so ridiculous and describing my vision for the bass line to a bass player who was 50 times the bass player.
Right.
And finally just realized, no, listen, if I'm going to weigh, if in this pan is my vision for the bass part, and in this pan is what you're actually going to play because you're awesome.
Exactly.
I'd like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and what is that famous story with Spielberg and Jurassic Park? So the DP they had for the first Jurassic Park movie, I can't remember who it was. I apologize. And maybe you guys can come in and remind us. But remember the amber scene where the old guy's in there getting the amber? Gorgeous scene, right? And it took the guy 2 days to light it. And Spielberg came in and said, "Come on!" I mean, Spielberg's used to impressing Lucas with how fast he can shoot Indiana Jones, right? And so he's like, "What is the deal here?" And the guy looked at him. He said, "Do you want it to look like crap?" And Spielberg just walked away. And then he got an absolute.
It is gorgeous.
And it's quite magic. It's a magical scene,
yeah.
Which is and so that was you hear this from the big boys in Hollywood, the big boys in Tom's house. Sweetie, was there a question?
There's a question from Natasha.
Okay, Natasha.
It says, it seems like more and more podcasts are being adapted for TV. Lovecraft County, Limetown. Do you think this will become more commonplace? Is this a route that writers could take to write and produce a podcast and get it adapted?
Well, yes, that brings us to something exciting that's happening this year. So I'll give a quick answer to that, and then I'd love for the state of radio and podcasting and things like that. So because I spent a billion years commuting to my corporate job, I would commute over 2 hours a day, and it got really, really quite old and painful. But I used that time, and that's one of the ways that I fell in love with all different kinds of audio formats and just audiobooks in general. And there's just something magical about it. I don't know what it is. Maybe gravitate towards that. Maybe it's because just audio sends something to our brains. You know that the biggest sign of any video or film production, crappy or good, is actually the audio. It's not anything else that's happening. It's the quality of the audio and then immersion there. So hire good sound designers. But what's wonderful is there is a resurgence of old time radio formats. In the old days, they got it. People gathered around the radio, and it was a fully visual experience for them in their heads. And so anyway, I think the answer to your question, I'll let Sam talk. So not only is the medium itself epic, and you have all these. So Disney and Marvel are not just to promote the next Marvel movie, but some of the highest end podcasts out there are fully dramatized audio dramas. And the word podcast makes it sound small, but it's actually huge. The format is actually huge. I call them audio dramas, not, but it just happens to be that they're delivered through your podcast stream, right? And it's on your phone or whatever. But the medium itself is huge. So in and of itself, the medium works, but it is also promoting shows. And so yes, it is a great way. And in fact, it's a cost-effective way for creators to not have to, spend $1 bazillion on making their first film, or even if it's a short film or whatever, or learn maybe some of all those techniques of filmmaking. If you want to get your story out there, a wonderful way is to do it through an audio drama, and the distribution's easy. And again, just the money is just less, and you can get your story out there. And so in and of itself, it's great. It's promoting things. A number of things have started as podcasts. That the original knew that they weren't going to make money on the original podcast, but they were deliberately promoting it that way to get to build an audience. These days, one of the most important things about pitching a movie or a TV show is not the story, it's not the budget, it's not the talent attached, it's the audience you have already built. So yes, a podcast is a great way to immediately do and to build clout for your project. So yeah, definitely. And there's so many great groups out there that can help you do that. There's groups on Facebook, there's websites, there's all kinds of different things that can help you teach you how to just get started with that. And there's just great content out there. Again, I mean, Disney and Marvel actually doing amazing, fully immersive, just wonderful. And BYU Radio is doing something in that arena. So can you just give us, Sam, just we have broadcast, we have on-demand audio. Tell us a little bit about what's cooking there in that universe and what you're excited.
Well, first of all, I want to say first of all, if there is going to be more opportunity, right? I mean, and if you want a career piece of yours to be, well, I'm going to create a podcast that's sort of designed to be, inflated into a television project or a film, that's fine. But I'm actually pretty cynical because I love audio so much.
Okay.
And I just think, just make an awesome podcast. Just make an awesome podcast. That's my counsel. Right?
I love it.
There's a great there was an interview with Aaron Sorkin, the trial of the Chicago 7, and he just said this tiny little thing that just went by in the interview where he said sometimes I hope not to paraphrase too much here, but he said sometimes you come across a great story, and sometimes that great story winds up being an opportunity to make a great screenplay, and sometimes that great screenplay is an opportunity to make a great film. But his attention to the notion of each one of those things having its own virtues and being worth working on, making excellent in its own right, really struck me. And I thought, okay, fine, I can make something that really is designed to just be something on the way to something else, or I can make something,
Right.
And so just for what that's worth, right? We have on my BYU radio show, our stock in trade is people who are telling stories on stage as part of this sort of 50-year-old storytelling movement that has given rise to storytelling festivals all over the country, and these really wonderfully talented, many of them storytellers who are thrilling large audiences on these kind of platform stages, telling stories into microphones, just one person at a time. And we decided at BYU Broadcasting that one of the ways we wanted to color our show was to start including some of this highly produced audio drama content and things like that. We're very, very, very excited about it, right? We produced a big project in connection with Gen Z, an audio outfit in New Jersey, and we were nominated for a Peabody. We're proud of that. We proud of Treasure Island 2020. It was kind of a modern time travel take on Robert Louis Stevenson's classic novel. Is it minute for minute more entertaining than the best of the solo storytelling stuff that's going on the show? Your mileage may vary, but there is so much value in this small intimate approach, and so much value in this larger approach too. The mistake, I think, is to say, it's a mistake to say, well, heck with this stuff. We could be producing this stuff,
Well, you know what?
Because this stuff can be terribly magical and also super light on its feet. You can produce it. You can produce it quickly. You can produce it easily if you've got the right people involved. And I sometimes describe the difference between building houses and making these. Sometimes some projects are building houses.
Right.
Other creative projects are making. What we're doing on the radio is making cookies every day. We're trying to make great cookies.
Well, and what's great about the whole podcasting thing is that it really is the best of both worlds, because if you do have a desire to make that, a big movie someday, great. But like you're saying, in and of itself, it's just this phenomenal medium, storytelling medium. I would not want the X-1 stories. Again, you got to go X-1 and find that. I would not want those turned into movies. They're just absolutely magical, experiences in and of themselves,
But having said that, we're super, super excited about some of the fully realized, fully produced, immersive audio dramas that are in the pipeline.
Yeah.
You've hinted at one that you brought to us that we're very, very excited.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is just a thrill to.
Yeah, it's super exciting. So a teeny little plug for that. So things are still, moving. The machines are still, but stay tuned either on that Facebook page I mentioned, or at tomdurham.com, or just at BYU Radio. some very, very, very cool stuff is coming. Fully sci-fi, fully awesome.
But the answer to the listener's question,
yeah, for
it's
sure.
a yes, no question. Yes.
Absolutely. And I think the whole world of audio just is exploding in a period. It's just exploding, you know. So we have about 4 minutes left.
Time for one more question.
Okay, really quick one. Let's hit it.
What do you recommend someone to do? This is Laurel.
Hi, Laurel.
What do you recommend someone to do to break into the writing of a TV show or in TV shows? Start with corporate like you did, search out contests, or is podcast the only way to start?
Podcast is definitely not the only way to start out. And so, Jeff, let me have you take that. I mean, someone wants to break into TV, right?
Well, first of all, start writing and start watching a lot of stuff. And watch stuff not just in the vein of what you want to write, everything that's going on. That's talking about relationships and people being able to trust you. If you follow what's going on, I assume when you say that you're thinking on kind of a Hollywood level. You've got to be able to talk about and just simply understand what's happening in the town itself and the way that trends are moving and who's producing what. You may have a great idea for something, and NBC is already actually developing that. But the more you write, then start to show your work to people. Tom was talking about reaching out to people. Start reaching out. There's a lot to learn about the way that agents work, and eventually you'll need an agent to help you with that. But if you can start out by getting into a writer's room as a writer's assistant, that's a really great way to go. And then just keep writing and get people to read your stuff. And eventually, if you just keep them, somebody's going to go, hey, why don't you come be on our writer staff? And it's usually not going to start that you'll have a pilot for something and say, let's make that in The Office, right? Mm-hmm. But if you just start writing and connecting with other people, let them read your stuff. That's a super great way to start.
And one of the great ways to phrase a question to someone, whether it's in an event like this or whether you keep working and start meeting people professionally in different industries, is it's okay to say, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know what the next step is, you know. And most people, like I would say 95% of the people who are way ahead of me, 95% of those people are totally cool with that. Like they don't think you're stupid and they won't like stop talking to you or hiring you, whatever, just because you asked a stupid question. If you're really humble about that, most people are like so cool. And I remember I was talking to to one of the great science fiction authors living today, and just, you know, I magically had her phone number and we project collaboration, and she was the sweetest, nicest, most accessible person. She said, well, you know, I'm in the phone book, because I was like, oh, I worship you, blah, blah, blah. She said, oh, I could answer your questions or whatever. She's probably not in the phone book anymore, but when I talked to her, she was just absolutely delightful, you know. And if you're nice and reliable and humble, you'd be amazed the doors that open, and then people will say, yeah, do this. Or if you say, I will intern for free. So for you to intern for free in one of these writers, and you prove that you're reliable, again, what the currency you've developed is trust, and that magically turns into other opportunities. Awesome. So I think that's actually a really great place to kind of start wrapping things up. Could I have Sam and Jeff, could you guys just tell people, if they want to learn more about you guys, where they go, how they would do that, how they would hunt you down? Is it just through IMDb, or is it a site or something?
You know what? I don't do a ton of social media. So I guess just read the news. I don't know.
Read the news to find Jeff.
I'm in the news all the time.
But,
yeah, exactly. That was an option. But we've settled all that. So.
Well, awesome. And hopefully we'll circulate with these guys again. Sam, can anyone reach out to? Is there any way for them to find you?
Yeah, for sure. There is a sampayne.com. There's and I'm on social media and things like that. I'm not in the phone book. Is anybody in the phone book? Is that a phenomenal? But also at BYU Radio, my show is called The Appleseed. The Appleseed at byu.edu is a good email address. I love to hear from people, so feel free.
And obviously, all of the BYU Radio, available through all the podcasting stuff that you can go and find there, or right through their own app or through their website. So, and again, TomDurham.com, MartianStudios.net. Feel free to reach out. And this has just been awesome. Big fan of LTUE. tomorrow evening, I think, interview with tomorrow, I think at 3 or 4 is interview with Melinda Snodgrass. That's going to be awesome. Star Trek screenwriter. The force is with you, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Tom and
Take care.
everybody.
All right, you bet.